The most famous Roblox game, Steal a Brainrot, believe it or not, has a lot of lost media that many players clearly remember, but that simply doesn't exist anymore. From the mysterious disappearance of Tung Tung Sahur to brainrots that never actually made it into the game, even though Sammi had already confirmed them. Today, we're going to break down the most popular lost media, the ones almost everyone remembers, and also the rarest and least known ones, which only veteran players swear they've seen at some point in Steal a Brainrot. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, get ready because this is about to get epic. Now, let's get started. And we're kicking things off with the most iconic lost media case in all of Steal a Brainrot. The one literally everyone has talked about at least once. And the one that still leaves the entire community asking the same thing. What the heck actually happened? Yeah, we're talking about the mysterious disappearance of Tung Tung Sahur. Everything started when players began noticing something seriously off. Tung Tong Sahur just wasn't showing up anywhere. Not in his base, not in the index, and definitely not on the runway, where he used to appear without any issues. It was like he'd been wiped from the game's files without leaving a single trace. Things got even weirder when the first rebirth changed. Before, you needed a Tripi Tropis and a Tung Tong Sahur. But out of nowhere, the requirement was switched to a gangster futura. No explanation, no announcement, nothing. Obviously, TikTok grabbed this and ran with it. The whole thing went viral fast, and that's when the biggest theory popped up. They removed him because of copyright issues. And honestly, it made sense. Tons of games have had to delete stuff due to copyright. The community started digging into who originally created Tung Tung Sahur. After a bunch of searching, they found out he was made by Noxa, an Italian TikToker. And not just that, turns out he also created several other super popular brainrots that were in Steal a Brainrot too. That's when players freaked out and started saying all of Noxa's characters were going to get deleted next. People got mad, like really mad, and began attacking him in the comments. But surprise, none of his other brainrots were removed. And to make things even clearer, Noxa himself came out and said he never told Sammi to delete Tung Tong Sahur. He had nothing to do with it. And yep, he was telling the truth. The real reason Tung Tong Sahur was removed is actually way simpler. There's a registered company named Tung Tong Sahur, created in 2024, 1 year before these AI-generated characters blew up. And since that name was already legally taken, they couldn't keep it in the game. And as much as we'd all love for him to come back someday, being honest, it's very likely Tung Tong Sahur is never returning to Steal a Brainrot, at least not under that name. Oh, and yeah, this also affects the old admin abuse event, where Tung Tong Sahur used to be the face of the whole thing. The second lost media case we need to talk about is another one that blew up inside the community. The mystery of Mateo and his supposed secret rarity. And yeah, it sounds wild, but tons of people swear that before becoming a god-tier brainrot, Mateo actually belonged to the secret category. In fact, a lot of players claim that when Mateo first dropped in the game, he was secret and generated around 350,000 money. Some people say this is a 100% confirmed and not just a rumor. According to them, there's evidence. His old cover photo, the index, and even the existence of Secret Mateo, a different version that many players swear they saw. But here's where things start falling apart. If you check videos from content creators who were online the exact day Mateo was released, you can clearly see that from the very beginning, right above his head, Mateo was labeled as a god brainrot. Meaning that, according to the launch footage, he was never secret. One popular theory says it might have been a visual bug that made Mateo show up as secret for some players for a few minutes or hours. Another theory says people might have confused him with extinct Mateo, that darker version with visible bones, that one is part of the secret rarity. There's also the whole rainbow mutation situation. Lots of people insist that Mateo originally had a way creepier texture. But that also turned out to be just a glitch, not an official design. And despite all this, Sammi and the moderators never gave any actual explanation. Nobody confirmed whether Mateo was truly secret at some point or if it was all just a game bug. Which, of course, only made the mystery grow even more. Orcalero Orcala also has his own little mystery in the community, and a lot of people don't realize that this character was originally supposed to be a secret. This case is pretty similar to Mateo's, but with one big difference. Orcalero never actually released as a secret. He entered the game straight up as a god Brainrot. And nope, this isn't some made-up rumor someone pulled out of thin air. Sammi himself, the creator of the game, confirmed it. When he first showed Orcalero on the Discord server, he explained that the original plan was for him to be a secret character, just like other hard-to-get Brainrots. In fact, several players remember that announcement and still have screenshots of the presentation where Sammi talked about Orcalero's original rarity. But for some unknown reason, that changed. When Orcalero finally dropped in the game, he no longer had the secret rarity he was supposed to have. Instead, he released as a god Brainrot. So, what happened? Truth is, nobody knows. Sammi never gave a clear explanation, and there was never any announcement addressing the change of plans. Maybe he tweaked it last minute for game balance, maybe he didn't want too many secret releases back to back, or maybe he just changed his mind out of nowhere. Whatever the reason is, it's something only he could answer. This case is all about the Brainrots that never made it into the game. The Oyo Yois, Meow, who eventually did get added, the Tripi Tropis, and the Canino Frankfurtino. All of these characters were super hyped by the community because everyone thought they were going to show up in the Fusion Machine. The funny thing is, when the Fusion Machine was first announced, nobody had any idea what characters it would include. So the community went wild with theories. And out of all those theories, these 4 Brainrots blew up. A lot of people started treating them like leaks or official designs, when in reality, they were all just fan creations. But here's the weird part. Each design came with its own rarity, its own price, and even specific values, like they were actually part of the game. And since almost every YouTuber talked about them as if they were confirmed, tons of players ended up believing they were official. But then a new question popped up. If Sammi added Meow with the exact same rarity shown in that fan-made design, does that mean the other 3 Brainrots might still come to the game later? It's totally possible. I mean, Meow did become real in the end. Nothing is confirmed, but the community is definitely watching closely. And who knows, maybe in a future update, we'll finally see these Brainrots come to life. Now we move on to the 5th case, one of the most famous, and at the same time one of the most confusing mysteries in the whole community. Cocodrilo Penicini. This character is basically an urban myth in style of Brainrot. Tons of people swear he appeared in the very first versions of the game, only to vanish without a single trace afterward. Everything began with an image floating around online. The character himself doesn't appear in the picture, but there is a sign with his name on it, and that alone was enough to make the community start wondering if he ever actually existed. From there, several players said they remembered him vaguely, like they'd seen him for just a moment back when the game had barely launched. The strongest theory is that Cocodrilo Penicini was removed because his name had a problematic double meaning, and because his original audio supposedly included some strange, not-so-appropriate phrases. And honestly, that doesn't sound too far-fetched considering what's happened recently with other Brainrots. For example, 2 pretty well-known characters, Trallalero Tralala and Bombardino Crocodilo, were reviewed because their audios caused a lot of controversy. Trallalero Tralala had a line in Italian that was considered disrespectful toward God, and Bombardino Crocodilo had an audio that mentioned bombings in Gaza, something extremely sensitive that upset a lot of players. With all that in mind, many people believe Cocodrilo Penicini was removed for similar reasons. His name carried an inappropriate meaning, and his audio didn't help his case either. The only clear thing is that ever since people first started talking about him, the topic slowly faded away. Nowadays, almost no one brings up Cocodrilo Penicini anymore, and his existence remains a complete mystery. To kick things off, we've got something that's actually really well known, and I realized that just by the amount of comments. And yes, we're talking about the Ballerino Lolo rebirth. To rebirth, it required 50 trillion, and Ballerino Lolo, you would get the megaphone and the B-trap. It was in the game for quite a while, but it got removed and replaced by the Udin Din Din Dun rebirth. And the reason is actually pretty simple, even if it doesn't seem like it. Back then, this brainrot wasn't that easy to spawn, with a chance somewhere between 15% and 20%. So, in conclusion, yes, it was in the game, but since new brainrots get added every Saturday, the chances of getting a Ballerino Lolo were already pretty low. On top of that, not many players had this rebirth at the time, so Sammi didn't really have any other choice but to nerf it. Now let's talk about the old mutations, and you're probably thinking, wait, what was wrong with them? Well, we're talking about the old mutations because of how the brainrots used to look. For example, the lava, galaxy, yin yang, and a few others. But honestly, it's pretty obvious why they got removed. And before we keep going, I want to show you some images so you can see just how cursed they actually were. I'm not even going to say anything. I'll let you read the comments and decide for yourselves. Personally, I like this change because everything looks way better now, but what do you think? Alright, now we've got a pretty interesting case that a lot of you mentioned in the previous video, and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend watching it after this one. Back to the topic, there's a supposed brainrot that allegedly existed and had to be removed. Just to be clear, it's not 100% confirmed if it was ever actually in the game, but there is a lot, and I mean a lot, of information about it. I'm talking about Johnny. This character looks like it's made of Play-Doh and kinda resembles one of the Oi 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 characters I mentioned in the last video. I took some time to dig deeper, and this is what I found. He's yellow and fluffy, and he's mainly known because of Brainrot Evolution, another game on Roblox. And by the way, Johnny was released on August 6th. What we're about to talk about is very similar to the old mutations, but this time, it's not about mutations, it's about old designs, and especially the designs of these three brainrots. At first, they looked exactly like what you see in the image, but then, I don't know what the hell happened because they turned them into something way uglier. Samini Spiderini ended up as a spider with a monkey head. Catatino Neonino became just a normal cat with a green aura. And Statutino Libertino literally turned into the Statue of Liberty. At the beginning, people weren't very happy about it, but after a while they kinda grew attached to them. And once that happened, Sammi ended up bringing back the original characters. It's rumored that these changes happened because the creator wasn't satisfied with their designs. Before we keep going, if you're enjoying these facts or finding them useful, you can let me know by subscribing, leaving a like, or dropping a comment. That way I'll know you're actually into this kind of content. But now, without interrupting anymore, let's continue with the rest of the removed content. I talked about nerfs, but there's one case I haven't mentioned yet. So now let me tell you about the price changes for Tralalero Tralala and Udindindindun. And why were they more sought after before than they are now? The answer is simple. Back then, they made way more money. But over time, more and more brainrots got added, and they slowly ended up being forgotten. This next one honestly surprised me because I remember it perfectly and I thought it was still in the game. The Bandito Bobrito Aura. Back then, it had black and white lights, just like you can see in this image. I realized this because a lot of people remember it the same way. Hey, but that doesn't change the fact that he still walks with insane flow. Let's continue with the case of Ricconi Giandalini. This is a brainrot that only appeared once, and is considered extremely exclusive. People can even offer you up to a garamararam for it. This brainrot showed up during the admin abuse war between Steal a Brainrot and Grow a Garden, and it's inspired by the game's creator. It's easily one of the most exclusive brainrots ever added to the game. Moving on to the old Udindindun. Its design didn't change, but its size did. When it first came out, it was much smaller, which is pretty interesting. It's not lost media, but it's definitely a detail almost nobody remembers. The very first admin abuse in Steal a Brainrot. Technically, this isn't lost media, but it's still interesting to look back at. In that first admin abuse, you can already see that the taco event has been around since the very beginning of the game. Nothing crazy, but still worth mentioning. Pippi Potato and its old animation. This legendary brainrot used to have a really smooth, relaxed walking animation. I honestly don't know why they removed it. I actually liked it a lot. There isn't much more information about this one. Dragon Cannelloni in the Fusion Machine. This one is not lost media, and it's also not real. I'm mentioning it because a lot of people say it existed, but it never actually appeared in the machine. It was all just a player misunderstanding that kept spreading. Trallalero tralala blood rot. You might say, that's not lost media. And yeah, you're right. But I'm including it because back in the day, it was absolutely top tier. You could get it from the runway or the roulette, and a lot of people remember it as some kind of hidden or rare brain rot, when in reality, it was just extremely loved at the time. King Coleman. This is a brain rot many of you probably know. It was supposed to be OG and was rumored to generate 250 million per second, but in the end, it never released. It's believed this was due to an internal decision by the developers. Brazzolini Spiderini, another spider variation, which generated 450,000 per second. It's said that only the creators and admins of the game have it. Honestly, it had a really nice design. Hoka Horloge. This brain rot was supposed to be added to the machine alongside Cellularcini Viciosini, but for some reason, Sammi never added it, even though it was already finished. It generated 15 million per second, but its recipe was never revealed. The fusion machine itself. The brain rots from this machine are also considered lost media, since many of them can no longer be obtained. Some had recipes, others didn't, but all of them belong to a phase of the game that no longer exists. Maybe in the future, Sammi will bring them back during an event or a runway. The Blood Rot event. This event hasn't appeared in the game for a very long time. It was one of the very first events and even had its own mutation, but right now, it's no longer available. Chilin Chilin and its old design. It used to look different with the tip facing forward. A lot of people complained about the model, so the creator decided to change it and flip the tip backward. The first case we're going to analyze has to do with some very special bases that, today, can no longer be obtained in any way. In Steal a Brain Rot, there were several exclusive bases that were only available for a limited time and are now completely out of circulation. Among these bases were the Galaxy base, the Halloween base, and the Yin Yang base. Each one was tied to a specific mutation and could only be obtained by meeting certain in-game requirements, more specifically by completing a specific index. For example, the Galaxy base could only be unlocked if you managed to complete its entire index, which was far from easy and required a lot of time and dedication. The Halloween base, on the other hand, used the same index system but was considered the easiest to obtain, since you only needed around 23 brain rots, making it much more accessible for most players. Then there was the Yin Yang base, which was by far the hardest of all, because it required you to collect every brain rot available at the time. This made it an extremely exclusive base, reserved only for the most dedicated players. Later on, the Aquatic base was introduced, which followed almost the same system as the Halloween base, and also required around 23 brain rots to unlock. Overall, all of these bases were, at the time, some of the easiest rewards to obtain in Steal a Brain Rot when compared to other in-game rewards. However, the situation today is very different. All of these bases are now completely impossible to obtain, as they were removed or disabled and never made available again, turning them into extremely rare items. And now, a fun fact that many players still argue about: the supposed candy base. When Steal a Brain Rot was in its early stages, rumors, edited images, and alleged leaks started circulating about a base called Candy. Many players claimed they had seen it in the game, but the truth is that it was never confirmed or officially added. This case is considered a clear example of the Mandela effect within the community, very similar to what happened with the famous Moon Rot base. While the Candy mutation did exist, the base itself was never real, which only caused even more confusion and debate among players. The nerf to the bros is one of the most controversial moments in Steal a Brain Rot, and many players still remember it with frustration. When the bros were first introduced into the game, they were insanely powerful. At the time, they could generate around 37.5 million, which was a huge amount back then and made them look like one of the best options in the entire game. However, that didn't last long. Just a few days after their release, Sammi decided to apply a nerf that drastically reduced the bros' performance. Almost overnight, they stopped generating as much, and all the effort players had put into getting them suddenly felt like a bad decision. If we take a closer look at the crafting cost and the resources required to obtain them, the outcome was pretty disappointing. Instead of profiting, many players ended up losing around 10 million, which caused a lot of frustration and anger within the community. What makes it even stranger is that although their price initially seemed justified because of how strong they were, to this day there's still no clear explanation for why they were nerfed so quickly. There was no prior warning and no well-explained official reason, which made the nerf feel unfair to a lot of players. The taco combination and the extinction combination were two of the most special and strange brainrots that ever existed in Steel a Brainrot. And no, they weren't like the others. These brainrots were completely different from the rest because they couldn't be obtained using the normal crafting machine that everyone knows. We're talking about limited edition brainrots with a very small number of copies, which made them extremely valuable from the very beginning. To craft them, it wasn't enough to just gather random resources. Players needed very specific brainrots and also had to meet certain in-game conditions, something only a few managed to do in time. This meant not just anyone could get them. Only the most attentive, dedicated, or well-informed players were able to unlock these combinations before they disappeared forever. And here's the key part. Once they were removed, they never came back. Because of their limited nature, both the taco combination and the extinction combination will never return to Steel a Brainrot. It doesn't matter how much you play, how far you progress, or how many brainrots you have today. There is simply no way to obtain them anymore. That's why these brainrots are now considered extremely rare pieces, almost like in-game relics. Owning one is clear proof that you were there at the right time, back when Steel a Brainrot was still in one of its most exclusive stages. The July 4th event was one of the very first special events in Steel a Brainrot, and for a long time, it was something very common and highly anticipated by the community. From the early days of the game, this event appeared regularly, and many players saw it as a normal part of the overall experience. For many veteran players, the July 4th event is a clear memory from the early stages of Steel a Brainrot. However, as time went on, the event stopped appearing without any prior warning. Updates kept coming, new events were introduced, but the July 4th event simply never returned. What makes it even stranger is that there was never an official explanation from the developers explaining what actually happened. To this day, no one knows for sure whether the event was completely removed, temporarily disabled, or simply forgotten. There were no announcements, statements, or clear hints to solve the mystery. Sammi's base was one of those bases that appeared during the admin abuse events in Steel a Brainrot and caught a lot of attention when it was added to the game. This base was available a few months ago, and for a while, several players were able to steal it and take advantage of it. However, since then, it hasn't been seen again, and to this day, it has never returned. Although there's no official explanation for its disappearance, personally, I think it never came back because it became obsolete compared to the game's current progression. When it was first released, the base made sense, but over time, Steel a Brainrot evolved very quickly. The brainrots included in this base were mainly designed for new players, helping them progress faster in the early stages. The problem is that nowadays most of the community already has a lot of progress, better combinations, and much stronger options. Because of this, Sammi's base lost its practical value as it stopped being useful for the majority of active players. Bringing it back to the game wouldn't have much of an impact since almost no one would actually need it. These cases prove that in this game, being in the right place at the right time is everything. If you miss it, there's no going back. And who knows how much more content may have disappeared without most of the community ever noticing. If you enjoyed this video and the entire trilogy, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like because that supports the channel a lot and helps me keep bringing more content like this, well-researched and straight to the point. Let me know in the comments which lost media case interested you the most, and if you remember any other removed content that I didn't mention. And now, I'll see you in the next video.